Welcome back to Hey Eintracht Frankfurt, the Bundesliga podcast covering everything there is to know in the English language about Eintracht Frankfurt. Technically, the third best team in the Bundesliga, officially now, but number one in our hearts. And that is all we're going to talk about today is that number 3 finish in the table. Follow the show, YouTube/HEF hefpod, Hey Eintracht Frankfurt on Instagram and Twitter and Blue Sky at HEF Pod. I think I got all those right. If you have any questions, hit us up. Find us on one of those, and Linktree will send you to all the others. Upcoming news about our summer activities in Louisville and Philadelphia will be finalized this week, and we will formally announce those next week. We hope people from all the EFCs and other independent fans across the country get a chance to join us. So, John, one thing to talk about today. One thing and one thing only. I don't even have any notes, really. We're just going to talk about the feelings and what was a 3-1 Frankfurt victory to secure Champions League qualification through the table for the first time in the club's history. It's a remarkable accomplishment. I'm not yet popping champagne. I told everybody last week to get your Possiman ready. And I'm not going to lie, I was at the PGA Championship down in North Carolina, and because of a rain delay, I was able to watch the first half in the car. I turned it off seconds before the Ansgar Knauf tying goal, literally like 46 minutes and 10 seconds before his goal was scored. I'm really proud that I did, and I'm really proud that I stayed in the dark the remainder of the match. I turned it on just at the end to see the celebrations, and I might have been the only person that cried that day out at Quail Hollow minus Rory McIlroy, because he was shit all weekend. But then that match, after rewatching it 2 to 3 times now, it's just that thing you were expecting all season, that we could never really put together 2 halves of play. And even after going down, there was no panic in the group. They reorganized defensively. They played a hell of a match, only allowing 1 shot on target. I think that's a testament to how that back group has grown. The organization back there, the maturity that's really found its form. And I want to know where your thoughts are. I'm still kind of surprised this is happening, given it felt we were in meltdown mode in recent weeks. But where do you stand today as we look back on what happened?
Yeah, I was definitely ultimately surprised pleasantly with the performance. I was able to watch the game until Freiburg scored, and then about a minute or 2 later, I had to turn off the game. So I didn't see the result until about an hour or so after the game had ended, and obviously was very, very happy with that. I've gone back and rewatched the game a couple times as well, and from the moment Freiburg went up, the team fought back. We pretty much controlled the game the entire rest of the way. Even when we were sitting back after being up 3-1, the defensive prowess that we showed during that, just not letting them get any kind of chances at all, nothing on target except for their goal, was really impressive, and something I don't think we've seen a lot from the team this year. We ended up with 6 shots on goal and 3 goals and a couple more that really probably should have been goals. Yeah, it was just a complete performance, and it's such a fun watch. I mean, hell, I'll probably go back and rewatch that game tomorrow again. It was great.
Yeah. It was one of those things where we've seen this story before, not necessarily this exact table position, but we've seen this scenario where Frankfurt has everything to play for and falls short. And I feel like when that first goal was scored, I was texting it, and it was all over our Discord chat. Here we go again. And that's something that I think we were fair to think that, because we have seen this story. We have been in this position or a position similar to it over the years and had things go against us. to see the guys regroup and not really have any sort of emotional reaction, not start yelling at each other. It was focused, it was calm, and it was organized. And I think for me, that shows a certain level of maturity that was probably missing in recent years where we have let some opportunities slip. Really, it was guys taking over who are, I hate to say Knaus, he's still like insanely young, but he's experienced.
Mhm.
And to see him take over, and Christensen, who's what, like 27, 28 years old
27, yeah.
in the prime of his career. Um, and then Shkiri finishing off that little tap in for the third goal, a guy who all of us have hated. And I honestly, I don't know if this changes the opinion, but I'm not a fan of his. But they did what we expected them to do. And to finish the season with points in the last five matches and wins in the two big ones that we needed, shows a level of resiliency that we're not accustomed to here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, something where we had drawn the 2 weeks prior to this when all we needed was a win from one of those and we knew we had Champions League. And it just really made that feeling like, are we gonna do it again? Are we really about to blow this opportunity? And thankfully we didn't. The guys went out there and absolutely killed off some demons. I don't think the Diva's gone for good at all, but that was a good hitter back moment from us.
Yeah. And, we'll talk about the rest of the Bundesliga in the second half of the show. But as we talk about us right now, it was refreshing to see this group um, take things into their own hands and not leave it in control of others. Um, it could have gone a couple different directions, but we held the cards going into the weekend, and we played the best hand by taking other scenarios out of play. Um,
Mhm.
were you surprised Freiburg didn't fight too much more? They carried the possession, not by a lot, but they did. They passed the ball well. But again, passing doesn't mean a lot if you can't create scoring opportunities, as we know all too well.
Yeah.
I was a little bit surprised that Freiburg didn't have a lot more fight. Maybe that early goal gave them a false sense of comfort. What's your take on Freiburg this weekend?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, but when you I was just pulling up their um goal stats and everything. They've only scored 49 goals in the league. That's the lowest in the top 11 in the league. And you kind of see that with their players. Like they have some intriguing options up front, especially on the wings with Dewan and Grifo. But I don't think they have a ton of quality outside of there. And I think that kind of allowed us to be in control of the game when they had the ball. Um, our squad has more quality than theirs, and that showed ultimately. So I think there was some fight from them, and they pushed when they, well, kind of pushed when they had to. But yeah, I think ultimately it's just a matter of where their squad met their ceiling to a certain extent. And for a lot of the year when they've been on hot streaks, they've relied on Atebolu to save them points, save them wins. So I guess ultimately I'm not super surprised that they weren't able to generate a lot, but I was more surprised that we were able to get as many shots off and get 3 goals.
Yeah. And the way that the group lined up after that goal conceded
Mhm.
and just got back to what they were doing, stuck with the plan, it worked. That's something that was really encouraging and a little bit frustrating in a way because we've been asking for that all year. You're not perfect. You're going to allow goals, but how
Mhm.
resilient you are, how you bounce back is the measure of the quality of a team. And we saw on match day 34 what that was. Um,
Mhm.
for some context historically for what's going on, for those that are new to the club or are not too steeped in the history of Eintracht Frankfurt. That's the best finish position wise in the table since 92, 93. Were you even born then?
No, I was not. Just a few
uh,
years before I was born.
and that's just a season or two before I started following the club. So kind of uncharted territory for that position. As
Hmm.
far as points, we actually finished with the same number of points as we did in the 2020-21 season, the one that was interrupted by the worldwide COVID pandemic.
Hmm.
That year we finished with 60 points, fifth in the table, and that only qualified us for Europa League that season. So if we look at it from that perspective, in the 2021 season, um, 60 points, we were still behind Wolfsburg, Dortmund, Leipzig, and Bayern. Leverkusen finished sixth with 52. So that was a pretty comfortable end of the season as Leverkusen lost two of their last three, and Frankfurt still didn't play well down the stretch, but managed to hold on to that spot. It's a different boat when you're trying to qualify for Champions League. I said it a month ago and it came true. I still thought Dortmund was going to find a way in, not necessarily because they're that great, but they hadn't been all year, but they found the right time for their best
Hmm.
players to heat up and qualify. And we'll talk about the league in a bit. What that meant for Frankfurt was our guys had to step up. And well, I wasn't too pleased with draws the last, three of the last five. What it did show is we were taking points because any loss in those scenarios instead of draws, and who knows how things end up in the end.
Yeah.
Just an exhausting season. The way that they came out so strong. This isn't the season recap. Next week's the season recap, but many times during that match, I thought about how we banked points early in the year to make the end of the season easier. And still losing Marmouche kept coming into my mind when I just wanted a go-ahead goal. Um, to come from Rasmus Christensen, who wasn't really known as an offensive player until the last couple months here. Um, According to the stats people that do statistic on things that are impossible to measure, I feel, they said that shot he took had a 4% chance of
Yeah.
going in. 4%. Um, yeah, it's just one of those things that never goes Frankfurt's way. And for it to do that with that kind of timing was
Mhm.
really a moment. I think once that goal went in, everyone exhaled and said, "Okay, if
Yeah.
that's going in, we're gonna be okay."
I thought it was pretty funny. His reaction to the goal, he goes in, basically scores like Kostic just from the other side, and then he's just casually walking towards the end. The camera cuts away to show the replay, and then it cuts back to him, just absolutely going ape shit once he's over in the corner with the fans and everyone dogpiling him, and that was really fun. He's such a mentality monster, man. He You were talking about not yelling at players early in the match, but he almost did when Ekatike took that shot. I think a few minutes before Knauf's goal, barely missed, and then Chaivi sent it way over, and you could see how upset he was because he was open for Ekatike to lay it off to him, but it worked out in the end, and then of course he goes and gets an assist on the scary goal as well. So yeah, what a player. He stepped up massively at the end of the year for us, and is a major reason why we are now in the Champions League.
So naturally, that's going to lead to rumors about his market value and which team from England or Spain is going to buy him.
He's
Not a
not leaving.
conversation for this moment, but he is the player you want to be the centerpiece of this group going forward.
Hmm.
He's in the prime of his career. He's playing his best ball right now. He's contributing at both ends of the pitch. It kind of gets overlooked because of what he's done offensively the last few weeks. It gets a little bit overlooked how good he is with his body in the defensive end of the pitch. He's
Hmm.
not a small guy, and he's learned how to be effective with his body without taking unnecessary penalties.
Yeah, he would profile him as someone who would be racking up double-digit yellow cards in his season. He just kind of plays like that, but he is really smart back there, and he's made so many crucial interceptions. And it's not just, clearing the ball, he does well, intercepting is good, but it's also his ability to, once he does that, get the ball moving forward as well, and that really helps eliminate even more threats from the other team. And I think that's a really critical aspect.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, I thought this was a game where we might need Kevin Trapp to do his thing.
Mhm.
He really didn't. But certainly when you look at his veteran presence there, the way he organized that back line and was communicating with them, that's about the most animated I've seen him. For a guy who's full of fire and emotion, that is that is why I'm so glad we stuck with him, because he has had opportunities to call a shot and say, I want to go somewhere else. I want a chance to play it at a higher level, even though there is no higher than Eintracht Frankfurt. Um, the man would be signed almost anywhere he wants to go. And he stuck it out here. He's committed himself here. And for him to have this opportunity to go back to the Champions League again, and you know, to clarify, I was not calling for Santos to replace Trapp. All I was saying was that we're in a good position with the backup situation, and if Santos had to be our regular one, um, he's primed to do that. But for Kevin Trapp and some of the other guys that have been here a long time, Timothy Chandler, um, running out of the longtime guys that have been around,
Yeah.
even Mario Götze, to see him get back to the Champions League, and I mean, just some really cool storylines with this group. And there's going to be a time to talk about next season, and we'll do that eventually. But your quick take on the future of this group. Um, Obviously, some of these guys are going to be in high demand because
Hmm.
they got attention for how well they played. But I would prefer to keep this group together as best we can. It seems like a group that Dino Topmuller knows how to work with. And by the way, while we're on the management subject, we have to give credit to Marcus Croce.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
what he has assembled here in just a few short years, um, from going from Europa League title and gutting our top talent window after window after window, losing our best players, and still finding a way to finish top
Hmm.
three.
Yeah.
Clubs that give up their best player don't qualify for Champions League. It's like the equivalent in American sports is like the trade deadline. I
Hmm.
mean, the best players, those that are competing for titles or qualification for the playoffs here in North America, they don't sell at the trade deadline, they buy. Only Frankfurt goes out and sells players and ends up equal or better in position than they were. Now, it didn't make it easier. It didn't make it easier, but the financial tact to collect the hundreds of millions that he has the last few years without losing ground in the table is absolutely remarkable. And I'm really confident no matter who we lose this offseason, um, he's going to put together a competitive squad next year. Doesn't mean we're winning anything, but we're going to be competitive, at the same level we're at right now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, he's shown that he's willing to let players move on, make the money. He's always said, I think, if a player progresses faster than the club, then we'll let them go. That's going to happen with a couple players this summer. But he's also shown an ability to reinvest in those positions and obviously not spend anywhere near the amount received for those players. So there's money in the bank. Um, it that can go towards anything. It's probably going to go towards some transfer fees this summer in a few different spots. Obviously, the permanent deals for Teot and Christensen coming in. So I think I trust Croatia to replace the outgoing players, and I think we'll have a very competitive squad next year. You were asking what does the future look like for this group? Um, we're probably going to lose 3 starters, possibly 4 over the summer. So there's going to be some turnover. There's going to be some turnover in the depth as well. Um, Players don't always come in and fit in right away, but I think that happens more in the winter that they don't. Guys who come in during the summer have been able to fill in pretty immediately. I mean, Teot, Christensen. Hell, going back to RKM, he came in and was great from the start as well. So I think, if we're able to get the business done early in the summer and get guys here and acclimated, then we won't have issues. I think this group definitely has the potential to compete for, one of those 9th through 24 spots in Champions League next year. I'm not saying we'll necessarily get that. I think it can compete for Champions League next year through the league. And whoever knows what's going to happen in the Pokal, because stuff always is you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, I think that this group is in a good position to be able to participate well in all 3 competitions next year.
Yeah, agreed. And we'll talk about that more as the summer progresses and moves start to happen, announcements come out. But let's talk about the rest of the Bundesliga right now, both from match day 34 and where the table finishes. We'll go through Europe real quick. The top 4, besides the top 3 of Bayern, Leverkusen, and Frankfurt, that really hasn't moved since like December.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact date that Frankfurt took over third, but this kind of feels like last year where we held on to that 6th spot for, like the last 20 weeks of the year. That's almost what this year felt like. But Bayern, Leverkusen, and Frankfurt 1, 2, 3. Dortmund passed Freiburg. Dortmund had a home win over relegated Holstein Kiel, who had 10 men due to a first half red card. So Dortmund finds a way to come back, winning 5, 6 in a row to end the season and qualify. That's a hell of a move for Niko Kovac to pull that off. One loss in the bunch, and they miss out on Europe altogether. Well, they still would have qualified with 1 loss, but the way, depending on where that loss happens, they could have missed Europe altogether. So Niko Kovac headed back to the Champions League, this time with Dortmund. As we're talking former Frankfurt coaches, Garrett asked me to throw this one in there about what happened with his Crystal Palace team this weekend, FA Cup winners over Man City. Crystal Palace coached by none other than Oliver Glasner and former Eintracht Brian in Kansas City legend Daichi Kamada. Interesting thing there. This is like the Glasner special. It's going to have to be called. Crystal Palace finishes, well, at the time, they still have a weekend left, but Palace was 12th in the Premier League table and went on to win the FA Cup, and that, I think that gets them to Europa League, not Champions League. But absolutely odd that Glasner and Kamada have that kind of European situation going on again. It's just it's a weird thing, but it shows what you can do when you put all your eggs in one basket. So back to the Bundesliga, as I'm way off track. Down in Europa League in 5th is Freiburg, obviously, and Mainz ends up in the Conference League, finishing 6th. They pulled that one off with an interesting 2-2 tie with Leverkusen on Saturday. So a little extra money for little brother down the river. But that's good for Mainz. They were tough all year long, really struggled down the stretch, but they were a tough group this year. Leipzig, for the first time in the top flight, missing out on Europe. Is anyone sad about that? Like
Absolutely
anyone at
not.
all?
I don't think their own players are sad about it because it means they all get to leave and go to better clubs now. So yeah, I mean, no one is upset that Leipzig missed out. Maybe Jurgen Klopp, but that's his own fault for going there. So
Yeah, for sure. Um, Looking towards the middle of the table, there's a lot of traffic between Mainz at 52 and Stuttgart with 50 points in ninth. Mainz, Leipzig, Bremen, and Stuttgart, kind of the second tier of the table. And that's where things fall off a bit. In 10th, Gladbach, Wolfsburg, Augsburg, and Union Berlin, just a really bad year for them. I mean, for Union Berlin and Stuttgart, who were for the last couple of years expected to be more, they were spending money, they were, positioning themselves to make runs, and neither one of those panned out. They were safely above that line, but they got to be looking at what they can do to regroup. There's got to be something going on in those places, especially Stuttgart, because they got a little reckless with their spending at one point, and I
yeah,
think this was kind of a wake up call for them.
yeah. And I don't. I think that the league position for Stuttgart kind of does them a little dirty. I think they were better than ninth for a lot of the season, but they didn't really address their defensive issues a ton. Yeah, they brought in a few players who have played decently and a couple of young guys, but really they just went out and spent what nearly 100 million on three or four strikers, and um, yeah, they scored a shit ton of goals this year, but they still ended up in ninth. So we'll see what they do. They can still make Europe though
Yep.
if they win the Pokal final.
Yep. Yep. They got a lot going on. So towards the bottom of the table, St. Pauli stays up for a second year. That's good for them. Again, and their run didn't come late in the year. It kind of came at that three-quarter point where they pulled some improbable points away. They finished with losses in two of the last three, but thanks to a lot of ineptitude below them, they stayed
Yeah,
safe. Hoffenheim, absolute trash season. I was kind of hoping they would go down because
yeah,
they're just,
same here.
I mean, their fans are checked out. They don't really have fans, but if they did, they'd be checked out. Heidenheim ends up in the relegation playoff position, which I believe starts tomorrow afternoon. It's
Yep,
2:30
it
here in the
does.
States. That's on ESPN Plus. If you haven't watched a relegation playoff, so glad we're not involved with those anymore. But it's a really fun competition to watch. We'll talk
Yeah.
about that more in a bit. But automatic relegation for Holstein Kiel and Bochum. So best of luck to you. Maybe see you in the future. But those coming up, of course, absolutely match day 34 in the two Bundesliga never, ever, ever fails to be the best finish in all
Mhm.
of European football. Automatic positions, not to Hamburg, who actually qualified the week prior with the victory,
Mhm.
but to Cologne, who gets a win on match day 34 and takes the two Bundesliga title.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There are some people on this podcast who are obsessed with big stadiums and traditional names and all that kind of stuff. I don't get off on stadium capacity. I want to see clubs that want to be here. So I hope, Cologne is a traditional name in the sport. Hamburg's a traditional name in the sport. They had never been relegated until they could never get promoted back. So it's a situation where these are known names coming back, but it really doesn't mean a lot if they're elevators and we see them going back and forth. So hopefully they learn their lesson and we see them coming back again. Um,
We'll
any
see about
thoughts on
that.
two Bundesliga?
Yeah, no, I think Haasval was pretty clearly the best team in the Zweite for pretty much the whole season.
Yeah.
Just they were, and they couldn't help but give us one more bottle job on the last day and lose the title to Colm. So that was pretty funny. But I like Cologne as a club, so I'm happy to see them back up. They have a lot of work to do over the summer if they want to stay in the Bundesliga. I think that squad is It's okay for the Zweite, but it's pretty weak as a Bundesliga club. I think Haasval is similar-ish position, but I think they got a better chance of staying up. And then you look at the third place going into it. A lot of teams could have finished in third, but Elversberg were the clear favorites to do so. They won and ended in third. Very tiny club, although apparently they've got some kind of rich backer of some sort. So we'll see what happens there against Heidenheim. I kind of hope Heidenheim stays in the Bundesliga. I think they did a good job after being eliminated from the Conference League of getting their shit back together, getting up into that playoff spot relatively comfortably by the end. And I really like the job Frank Schmidt's done there. So those two relegation playoff games should be a lot of fun, and I'll definitely be tuning into the first one tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. For those keeping track, Jake at 50 plus donor will be ecstatic for this one with his team headed back. There was nobody more depressed than him this year, having to talk about his side just struggle the way they did and finally succumb to relegation. But he'll be happy for that one. We'll have him back on the show. For those that also have been following the downfall of Schalke, they lose their final 4 matches and somehow avoided relegation or relegation playoffs.
Those bottom three in the Zweite were just so
Brutal.
terrible this year. I mean, Schalke could have fallen into the playoff spot, but they were never getting auto.
They banked
relegated.
some early points.
Yeah.
Back to the first division for a couple minutes here.
Mhm.
Another anomaly that I'm so glad didn't play out the way it could have. Freiburg with a -4 goal differential headed to Europa League. If they were going to qualify for Champions League with Frankfurt ending with a 22 goal differential, if they had beaten us, it would have been around 20 or less.
Mhm.
I would have lost my damn mind. Is
Yeah.
Freiburg like, I know their record, 34 matches played, 16 wins, 7 draws, 11 losses. That's not bad,
Mhm.
but their inability to score goals and their inability to stop people from scoring goals just seems like a weird way to fall into a 5 position in Europa League.
They really just had that um, stretch. I think it was around February or March where they just didn't concede a goal for 5 games or 6 games or some shit like that. Atubolu set a new club record in minutes without conceding a goal, and that's kind of what propelled them up into this position. Yeah, if they had beaten us and qualified for Champions League, then it would have been a -1 goal differential. So still pretty bad. Maybe they could have gotten up to even if they had scored more goals. But yeah, it's not something you see. I think I went back the past 10-ish years looking at top 5 leagues and teams to qualify from the Champions League. No one from the league position has qualified with a negative goal difference before. So it would have been some kind of achievement. But I think something that teams that have a negative goal difference generally aren't very good. And I think that's kind of the case with Freiburg. Oh my god, fucking Oilers just scored again. But like Freiburg's a solid side, but I think that for the quality of their team, Europa League is a more fitting competition than Champions League.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to the point about goal differentials, I got to bring this up because it's relevant today, especially. We fell out of the Europa League competition against Tottenham. And, Tottenham is absolutely hot garbage in the Premier League. They're sitting on a +2 goal differential in the league, but 17th in the 20-team table. They won the Europa League today. So it's not necessarily about, how you play all the time. It's how you play in the right matches. And Tottenham was good enough in the right matches to win the Europa League while finishing 17th in their domestic table, where they'll likely end up. But they're going to be in Champions League next year due to playing well at the right times. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what Freiburg did. They played well in the right games to put himself in the right position in the table. Looking at the table, top to bottom, is there one particular team that you say, man, they really punched above their weight class throughout the season?
I mean, I would say it's probably Freiburg. I think you could also, in terms of punching above their weight, you could argue Werder Bremen. I think that the squad they have is decent enough to try to fight for Europe, but they only missed out by a point. And I don't know. I think that's a pretty good job for the team that they have. They also don't have a lot of money right now, so yeah, it's good work from them. Obviously, they also have a negative goal difference, but yeah. So I think for me, Werder Bremen is kind of the team that sticks out more because at least Freiburg has made Europe recently, and we know that they have a decent squad.
Yeah, my key takeaway isn't one particular side. It's just the fact that there are 9 teams with a chance to qualify for Europe on the final match day. So half of your table is granted, there's 6 positions, maybe 7, depending what happens in the cup final. But
But it won't be a
they,
league position.
yeah, exactly. The league from top to bottom has a lot more parity than it has in the past,
Mhm.
where we knew the qualifiers probably by the first week of May, maybe the second. But we're in a position now where every match day, right down to the end, affects the entire top half of the table. So that makes it a lot more fun to watch, I think. Certainly, this year we're back to Bayern running away with the league, but I think
Yeah.
the pieces are in place for that to not be a regular thing going forward. Before we get into our last segment here, John, what are you drinking right now? I see something that looks delicious.
Right now I have an Imperial Pilsner from Dogfish Head. Saw it in the grocery store the other day, and can't say I've ever seen an Imperial Pilsner before. So drinking that, pretty good. Obviously, a little more hoppy than a normal Pilsner. It's 7% alcohol, so yeah,
Oh,
pretty tasty stuff.
good stuff. Eat anything good lately?
Um, Nothing like particular that I can think of. Just yeah,
Put you on the spot there.
yeah,
So
right.
I'm in Columbus, Ohio right now, and I'm getting work text. I'm in Columbus, Ohio right now, which my affinity for this state is entirely sarcastic. I hate this place with a passion of 1,000 suns. Um, but I found a brewery today called Elevator Brewing here in Columbus, which is outstanding. Really good amber lager, delicious copper color, nice and crisp. But
Oh yeah.
drinking water right now, Michigan water. I bring my own water from the state with some of the best water in the world. 20% of the world's freshwater surface water supply is in the Great Lakes. Um, anyway, but while I'm here, I was at that Elevator Brewing Company and I had maybe the greatest pork chops in my entire life.
Nice.
Absolutely outstanding on the bone, nice, crisp on the outside, soft on the inside. Go to Elevator Brewing, get the pork chops. Absolutely outstanding. But tomorrow, before I leave, you ever been to Columbus?
I've only like stopped by on the outskirts before, so no, I
Okay.
haven't like spent time in the city.
There's a place, and maybe this is why I'm fat. Um, it's kind of my go-to when I'm here. It's called Wario's. It's a kind of like a hoagie place that you would find out east with, the cheesesteaks and Italian sandwiches and massive hoagie buns. I'm gonna get a lot of hell, and I might not be allowed at the friendly in Philly. Um, I've got a top 10 cheesesteak list in Philly. I would put Wario's here in Columbus up with those. And I'm thinking about getting like a cooler of them and freezing them and taking them home because they're so good. But Wario's beef, Columbus, Ohio, right across from Nationwide Arena. Don't miss it. John, last
Yeah,
segment. Um,
gotta grab some of those on your way to Philly in the summer and compare.
ooh,
Like,
start a war.
just yeah, right.
They like set up a barricade at the border and don't let this guy in. I'm probably no longer going to be allowed to EFC Philly events. Fantastic. Um, so one last segment here, and it's short and sweet because I think we're going to do a season recap. But right now, I don't think we can talk about this weekend without talking about the season that was a little bit
Mhm.
more, and a little sneak peek into season previews with a couple of thoughts on key players. Will Hugo Ekitike be around in August?
Uh, no, I don't believe so. Uh, but possibly. Croatia seems pretty adamant that he wants 100 million euros for him. I don't. Obviously, there are very few teams in the world that can pay that amount of money, and even fewer of those teams that desperately need a striker. So we'll see. There are some other good strikers out there on the market. I ultimately think he will leave, but the possibility is still very, very minimally there that he stays.
I have a pretty good idea that it will be very similar to the Kolomuani move, where he's with us through the training, through the camps. He may play in a couple of the early matches, and then it comes down right to the end of the window where someone finally says, "Fine, here's that 100 million." It's just a weird situation with
Yeah,
guys like that. He's a personality guy, but he's not the personality that's all about him. I had the wrong idea of him when he came in, and the apology could not be more due because
mhm,
he's been a glue guy for this group. He's always pumping up his teammates, and when he scores, he's giving credit to
yeah,
his team, not just himself. And that's rare to find for a guy of his YouTube renown and, that kind of that kind of swagger that he has. One more guy I want to ask about,
yep.
Hugo Larson. Will we see him again?
I I think he stays, though I would almost be more willing to move on from him. I mean, obviously, I don't want to move on from Ekatike, even though I think he's more gone than Larson. Um, I just think that Larson, to me, he's a decent player, but he's not some incredible central mid, and I think it's not a bad idea for the club to cash in on the success that he's had and find the next guy in that position. But I think because we did end up qualifying for Champions League and there doesn't seem to be as much demand around Larson out there. Obviously, there are some big teams that are interested in him. Um, I think he wants to stay as well as is what it looks like. So I think that we'll see Hugo Larson in a Frankfurt jersey next year.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be hard to nail down a particular price tag for him.
Hmm.
Um, at his best, he could be worth a ton of money. At his average, I think that number goes down significantly. And with his age, there's still a lot of questions about who he is and
Yeah.
what his maximum potential is. So that could be, another guy where if he has a real hot start to the 25-26 season, maybe he's a winter move. But I think teams will be a little more cautious with him.
Yeah.
Though some of the names I've seen floating around are teams that are not usually cautious with money. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll see
Exactly.
what happens.
That's what gives me cause to say that he might go. But yeah.
What about Ansgar Knauff? Is he ours?
It's a weird one because I've seen Liverpool linked to him a couple times. I don't see where Liverpool would be the kind of team to really go after him. Uh, I don't see where Knauf leaves. I don't think that he's progressed further than Eintracht Frankfurt. I think because he can be just so inconsistent, even though when he's on, he's really good. Yeah, I think that'll give a lot of teams pause, and I think Ansgar Knauf will stay.
Yeah. I think some of his star power might be because of what he's done over the last month, which is probably his most consistent play since he's been here. And he's been here a while now. It's crazy. 3 seasons, which seems, short. But when you consider that the rest of this group is, 2 years or less for most of these guys. The youngest team in the history of the Bundesliga by average age, and yet they qualify through the league. It's been an outstanding ride to follow. We are going to do a complete season preview next week and discuss it in more detail. And it really wasn't a roller coaster. We use that term a lot on the show. The emotions of following this club are a roller coaster, but as far as the way this season was, there were a few different plateaus, but there were no roller coasters. And I do thank them for keeping it semi-steady, because it's been a while since we felt this positive feeling going into next year. I mean, the last time we felt it was after that Europa Cup victory, and that was pretty short-lived. Just because of all the question marks. I hope there's some stability this offseason. But that's going to be the main topic of discussion in our season recap. Next week, we'll do a Frauen recap. We'll do a men's recap. And then we're going to talk summer plans. I've told you some of them, but I've held a couple things back, trying to get them finalized for the summer in Louisville and Philadelphia. Talking to a couple other EFC members, and we're going to do some fun stuff. So we'll talk about that more next week. John, where are you at on social media?
You can find me on Instagram at johnben33 or Blue Sky at johnben.bsky.social.
And you can find me on Instagram at Chris N. Monroe, or ride with me on Peloton at C in the D 313. You can find the show, like we said at the top, on Instagram at Eintracht Frankfurt, at hefpod on X and Blue Sky, and I probably forgot some others, so head over to one of those and find the link tree. On the link tree is a link to buy tickets to the matches in Louisville and Philadelphia this summer. I just checked earlier, those links are still valid. You can buy their tickets through there, and that is important because the club gets feedback on how many fans are coming to support Frankfurt. So even if you want to go sit somewhere else in the stadium, buy your tickets in the block. So that's it for Matchday 34, end of the Bundesliga season. Everyone here is smiling. Everyone in the Black Forest is not, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Until next time, John in Virginia, Chris in Ohio. Till next time, tschüss.
Eintracht Frankfurt, schalalalalalala. Hey, Eintracht Frankfurt, schalalalalalala.